So there's two things I would like to establish with this opening. The first being the difference between denotation and connotation. Denotation being the direct definition from the dictionary used for a word, and the connotation being the practical application of a word or a phrase outside of its dictionary meaning. We understand that the colloquial meaning of what someone says without having to take it literally when written. This is further explained with the language game, a philosophical concept developed by Ludwig Wittgenstein, referring to the idea that context matters, that the meaning is only a result of the rule of the game being played. An example of this would be the difference between someone yelling out water as a firefighter versus someone yelling out water in a restaurant versus someone yelling out water on a ship. So, John Brown did nothing wrong is an expression in support of the morality of John's actions in their totality. I would like to keep in mind for everybody here that my opponent is not arguing against the prompt as written, but rather the sentiment of the prompt, and would have to prove that the agreement of the morality of John Brown from this claim is what is wrong. The second thing that I would like to be kept in mind is that all men and women in this country are granted this presumption of innocence. So my stance is actually the one that's granted by default in our country, while my opponent's stance is one that requires the highest burden of proof without a reasonable doubt, which I do believe a rational observer would be able to derive when presented the argumentation in favor of a man who helped build the Underground Railroad, raised funds to help slaves become freemen, and took up arms to liberate his fellow man from the oppression of slavery that was enforced by the government at the time. I will concede the rest of my time.
If an ethical rule is going to mean anything, does it have to apply exactly the same way to every person, no exceptions for anyone?
No.
All right, I'll go ahead and yield the rest of my time in that case. In Cross, my opponent refused to commit to the universality principle. By rejecting said principle, he implicitly allows special exemptions for certain causes and effectively said that morality isn't a real standard. It's just whoever claims the strongest or noblest cause gets to decide what's right. That's the logic of might makes right, the same principle once used to defend slavery itself. Slavery was one of the worst evils in human history, and anyone who fought it deserves serious respect. But the claim we're examining today is extremely specific. John Brown did nothing wrong. The moment this slogan comes under scrutiny, the most common defense is to back away from the words themselves. It's not literal, it's just a meme, hyperbolic phrasing for anyone who took on slavery when others wouldn't. This, Mott and Bailey, gives away the game. If the statement can only be defended by immediately explaining that it doesn't actually mean what it says, then on its face, it isn't true. You're arguing for a different, weaker claim that Brown was mostly right or heroic on a balance, or that his flaws don't matter next to his cause. These are legitimate positions worth debating, but they are not the same thing as nothing wrong. Basic logic demands the same consistency from ethical rules that it demands from anything else. A rule cannot be true and false at the same time. If a rule is real, it has to apply to everyone, no special exemptions for particular people or particularly noble causes. The moment you carve out an exemption, it stops being a rule and becomes a privilege for whoever can claim the best justification. Take the straightforward rule most of us accept. It's wrong to start violence against people who haven't attacked or harmed anyone else. The rule has to be universal. There can't be an asterisk that says except when the cause is important enough. Because once the person gets that asterisk, anyone can write down their own. Potawatomi Creek, 1856, Brown and his men dragged 5 unarmed men from the settlers in their homes asleep in the middle of the night and hacked them to death with swords. Those men were pro-slavery in their views, but none owned slaves, and there was no evidence of any of them personally attacking or killing anyone. Saying that this act is permissible because Brown's broader fight was just requires the exact special exemption that destroys that rule. Slavery was monstrous, glad it was destroyed. But defending the plain words, John Brown did nothing wrong, forces us to bend an basic ethical standard that has to remain straight or it breaks for all of us. Yield the rest of my time.
All right, Griffiths, do you think there's a difference between murder, combat during warfare, and self-defense?
No.
Okay. So you think self-defense and murder are basically the same thing?
If we're talking about a soldier being on the offensive side, and then they would be it would be fine for them to attack them or for to defend against said person. But if a person is defending, then it would not be ethical to kill them or to
So
harm
there
them.
is a difference, and it's not stringent, and the rules change depending on context. Interesting. Next one. Do you think that life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness should be restrained by the confines of democratic legislation?
Yes, I'd
So
agree
you
with
think
that.
that your life, liberty, and your pursuit of happiness should be up to the vote of legislation
Oh
rather
no, sorry.
than something you.
No,
Okay.
you're
So
right. I misspoke.
do you think self-defense should be up to a democratic vote?
No,
Do you believe in guilt by association?
no,
Do you believe there is justification for preemptive action?
no.
Okay. So if somebody said they were going to sexually assault your daughter to your face and then started to walk while saying your address, hasn't hit you, hasn't committed the sexual assault yet, but says they know where your daughter lives and are going to attempt to do so, you wouldn't be justified in taking preemptive action to stop them before they even begin to attempt the sexual assault?
No, but you could follow them, and if and when they actually start to break into your house or trespass or to start to try to grab her, then you could use force to defend her. Because
All right.
anything else is pre-crime, and makes you the aggressor of violence, initiator of violence.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned an incident that I thought was interesting, the 5 people that he murdered.
Mhm.
Yes, as you said, murdered.
Mhm.
Do you understand the historical context of what was happening in Bleeding, Kansas at the time?
Yes.
So you
And
understand that it was a territory civil war that was occurring at the moment?
mhm.
That the prelude of this was filled with border ruffians that were a militant group that was entering free settlements and was harassing them, attacking them, assaulting them, kidnapping.
Yes, and I condemn all those actions, but none of them, none of those 5 individuals that Brown killed had done any of that.
Interesting that you mentioned that because actually, when I was doing research on the people that John Brown killed, it was 3 Doyles of the 4. Actually, out of the 5, he spared the wife and kid. These 3 Doyles were prior to living in Kansas, lived in Tennessee, where they were plantation guards as well as slave patrollers, and had moved to Tennessee and testimony had stated that they had come to use bloodhounds to assist in hunting down runaway slaves for the cause of Kansas while it was, during the Civil War time. Not only this, the Doyles had been reported to have threatened violence against John Brown's family and had been accused of working with border ruffians. Again, a militant group that used force to harass free settlements along the river.
And and you can say they've done any of that, but or were paid for any of that, but did they actually use force against anyone to do something? Because unless you can prove that, then, like you said earlier, they have the presumption of innocence. And I could also say that he also killed people. He was their judge, their jury, and their executioner. He killed people without going through the court process, without going through a presumption of without presuming innocence upon them.
Yes, but at the time, Kansas had fraudulent elections, and the government was corrupt to the point at the time where a congressman was attacked and brutally beaten while he was in the Senate chamber, nearly for condemning the action of slavery. He was
And
almost beaten to death.
Okay, and so I'm also condemn that action. You're
Yes. So we got to build the context of what is happening. The context of what is happening is we have a state within civil war with militant groups going around and raiding encampments. And prior to this, there was the sacking of Lawrence, where pro slavery settlers, along with the Douglas County Sheriff, an appointed position, attacked Lawrence for being founded by anti slavery settlers. They killed a man. They destroyed the newspaper so they couldn't spread the Free State newspaper, and then burned their hotel down to the ground. This comes also as we have pro slave politicians, suspected slave hunters who also openly threatened violence against John Brown's family. Not only are they guilty by association and breaking the fundamental liberties that you have for freedom by engaging in slavery, but they were actively conspiring with militant groups in the area to harass and harm and attack settlements that were nearby. John Brown could have executed multiple people in this town. He entered 3 cabins. The first cabin, he spared a wife and a child that was under 18. The second cabin, he spared everybody, despite them being Southerners, because he believed that they were not a threat and did not engage in threatening them. And in the last cabin, he spared another wife. That recognized his son. These people could have ousted John Brown. By leaving survivors, he could have been found out and tried and executed pretty soon after, but he still chose to leave these people alive because these people did not do wrong to them. Does not paint a psychopath. This does not paint someone breaking the liberty and freedoms of someone else, but somebody that is responding to an active and consistent threat in his backyard and taking preemptive action to protect his family as well as fellow Americans at the time.
I, to me, that just sounds like someone who doesn't want to have 1,000 murder charges on their head. He's just because he doesn't kill, he only trespasses and kills 5 people. That doesn't automatically grant him an exemption from however many other people that however many people he didn't kill.
It doesn't, but we can look at the character of who he killed and who he didn't kill to judge whether or not it was wrongful or not. And I think that taking the history of John Brown, someone who did not commit these violent acts in the North, but instead founded and helped with the Underground Railroad, worked his ass off to give money to recent freemen, and then also established these and helped protect these anti-slavery settlements. This shows a history of nonviolence and altruism, which means that couple that with the history of the Doyles and the Whitmans past of being with militants who had harassed and harmed local settlements, had hunted slaves. Remember, hunted, found them, took people that were trying to become freemen and enslaved these people, helped with this process, as well as worked with the local corrupt government to help target other settlements by this river. Weigh that. One is a preemptive action to protect his family after a credible threat from people who have been known to participate and act in violence in the middle of a civil war. While the other is an altruistic man who was protecting his family and liberating people whose country had betrayed them.
Again, I am glad he did. From most of what he did, I condone the funding of the Underground Railroad. Killing slave owners, etc., etc. I condone all of that. I have issue when you go to someone and kill them without, and kill people who, the worst those 5 did were send death threats, which, as I said earlier, does not constitute aggression. Otherwise you could say any speech is aggression. You could say that advocating for anarcho-communism or anarcho-capitalism or any, or whatever your ideology is, whatever my ideology is, etc., is constitutes aggression, or anything that isn't what society is in right now. If you if you believe that sent the if you believe that sending death threats is aggression, then you have inherently agree that with might makes right, and you cannot end up, and then you're then contradicting yourself within the prompt
Context
itself.
matters. They were in the midst of a civil war. The government
Context
did
does not
not
matter.
have a democrat. You live in a society right now where you can make these assumptions because you live in a world post what John Brown did, and we have law and order restored and civil rights and such. He lived in a time where his state was in civil war. There was militant groups raiding. The local sheriff was engaging in these raids. There was no democratic
So what?
government of
So why didn't
Kansas. They
he?
had fraudulence at the
So
time.
why didn't he kill any of them? Why didn't he go after any of them? That seems to me like it'd be a much better target than 5 random people who were not doing not
Random?
who weren't
They threatened
not.
him. They hunted slaves. And not only that, they were part of a local militant group that was attacking free settlements. And not only that, but they were also part of a local political group that was in charge of enforcing slave laws in the region. This is not random bystanders. The random bystanders were in the second cabin. Remember? He spared those ones.
And
And remember, 56 political killings that were documented, estimated to realistically be 200 of on the anti-slavery side. The government, there was no functioning government, a civil war going on, sheriffs going and raiding settlements, and he was actively being threatened. And you wonder why this man killed these people? 5, by the way, compared to the hundreds that the opposition is killing.
you're
You may
comparing
not think that's moral, but that's hard pill to swallow.
now you're comparing an entire group to a man. And so of course an entire movement is going to kill more people than a single man's going to kill.
Well, if you want to compare man to man, I mean, we can also go that we don't have definitive proof that John was the one that executed these people directly, but I'm attributing the action of his groups to this. But if you can prove that John Brown was the one that actually killed all 5 of those people, then go ahead. We can compare man to man at that point. But we don't have any records that would prove that. So you can't prove without a reasonable doubt that even under your own assumptions, he was the one that directly killed. If we want to go man for man.
So I don't know. I guess I'm just kind of lost because as far as I understand, he was there. He and his men were the ones who went over to into
Yes.
their cabins, as you said. Yeah, so he did kill them then. What? I'm confused.
Okay,
You're
so you're
saying that
attributing it to a whole group. So now it's okay when you're doing it, but when I do it, it's not all right. I said we can can do group by group. If you want to compare what his raiders did, because he did not do these actions alone, and you want to say he is also responsible for his raiders, fair play. I'm also attributing that to him. But you can't turn around and then tell me that I can't attribute the militia groups that the people he executed were a part of aren't like one of the same. So if we're going to compare groups to groups, we compare groups to groups. If we're going to do person to person, we got to do person to person, but we don't know who is the person that pulled the trigger, who is the person that slit the throat, who is you're right. All of that is lost with time.
well, I think the difference is that I'm comparing a small group of people who have a definitive leader, but the entire movement of what do you call of the entire movement of the South, or of the pro-slavery side, didn't really quite have a centralized leader a la John Brown. They were inherently, they were decentralized. They all came en masse, and yes, they were violent, and I obviously condemn that. As did the anti-slavery. They also came in, and though I agree with them, they were also using violence to perpetrate their ideology. When, if at all possible, slavery and every crime should be responded to peacefully, like I said, if possible.
If possible, yes. Well, I think I've more than established that your definition of if possible isn't realistic in the situation here, where you don't have a functioning centralized government, and the government that you do have is fraudulent and also committing violence to a portion of the population and actively participating in the violence against your people. Sometimes you got to fight, because if you stand by, that means the death of your people. And I
Yeah,
think that's
yes.
yeah.
Yeah, I agree. If someone is actively trying to harm you, you should be absolutely allowed to defend yourself. This is I don't see where we're disagreeing upon this here. But if
You're
someone's just
saying you're characterizing it as he murdered 5 people. I'm saying that if you look at the context of the situation, he didn't murder 5 random people. He attacked 5 people that were involved in a inherently fucked up and prejudiced system that took away rights from other people, violently harassed, attacked, and raided settlements along this river, and actively threatened the Browns family, as well as attacked Free State men along the same river. I mean, Robert McGlone noted in a when reflecting on the incident that it seemed bizarre that Brown was concerned about the health of the wife after he had just killed her husband, but that her husband was guilty of attacking Free State men and threatening the Browns. So, in his mind, John Brown justly executed, but his wife was innocent and therefore not punished. And you want to say that this was a violent happenstance out of nowhere? You also have the wife of the other spared husband, Mahala, saying that, criticizing her husband while he was being dragged for execution, saying that this is what he gets, and that she warned him that this is what happens when you get involved in divalence. And I had to look up this term, which was a term used to describe basically harassment and persecution.
Are the intentions behind actions an important factor in the morality of that action?
Yes.
That simple? You don't want to expound? That's fine.
Sure. If you want me
Yep, go
to
ahead.
expand on it, I will. Yeah, I mean, obviously, it matters if you're trying to harm somebody, if you're trying to protect something, or if you're mistaken on something. Uh, if somebody tries to go out of their way to purposely hurt someone, the context matters of that. Like, it's like, okay, well, why? What is the purpose? Well, the purpose is that he threatened my family and I want to keep them alive. And this person's known for attacking people and they're right next door and they're conspiring with militant groups and using the power of the state to persecute the people I'm trying to free. Well, that's interesting fucking context. That thing matters, instead of it was like, hey, I don't like my neighbors. I want to kill them. It kind of, means two separate things. Context matters in that, and your intention surely does matter. And it could be as small as something of like, if I say something to you that's hurtful, but I say it because I'm your friend and I want to like tell you the tough truth that nobody else is telling you, and it hurts your feelings. This is a little bit different if I tell you something to hurt your feelings because I don't like you and I want you to feel pain. There's clearly an intrinsic value to the intention of an action when deciding whether it's just or not, and at least calculating, the weights of the decision someone makes.
Are the intentions behind an action an important factor in determining the morality of that action?
No, the intentions of what ultimately determine the morality of the act are not what ultimately determine the morality of an action. What matters is the action itself. Did it initiate force against someone who had not initiated force of others? Good intentions do not turn a rights violation into something morally right, and bad intentions do not automatically make a defensive act wrong. If we judge morality by intentions alone, anyone can justify pretty much anything by claiming their heart was in the right place, including the slaveholder who sincerely believed he was upholding civilization and providing for his property, quote unquote.
You asserted that this activity took place because of the fact that the Civil War was taking place. Was the Civil War?
Civil War, not the Civil War.
Oh,
a
I'm
civil
sorry.
war within a tutorial civil war. This precedes, so the
Go
civil war
ahead.
you're talking about is the civil war between America, the North, South, free states. But prior to it was the Bleeding Kansas, which is described as a territorial civil war or civil dispute, depending on the historian you're talking to. Which means that while they were being admitted to the Union, the discussion came up on whether they should be a slave state or a free state. And during this, you had people coming in from other states trying to influence it by bribery, killing politicians, swaying votes, and they started raising encampments and waging war against other encampments with militant groups, and it became a bloody incident contained mostly within the state, with some of it bleeding into like Missouri and Tennessee, I believe. So it's a state civil war, not the country's civil war.
Do you believe that you can have a bloodless revolution or a revolution without bloodshed?
Um, in terms of the American Revolution, or sorry, American Civil War, probably not, because the South was going to hold on to the slaves as long as they could, and there was going to have to be people who died. Now, I would say it would have been preferable for, um, honestly, something somewhat similar, although maybe slightly toned down to what John Brown did, which is funding the Underground Railroad, funding slave revolts, instead of mass conscripting the North, um, basically creating slavery within the North to fight slavery, which they also did conscription in the South.
Which is, do you think there's a difference between murder, warfare, and self-defense?
Yes, there's a difference between self-defense, and and um, and murder, obviously, and there's and when it comes to warfare, is a very gray area, and you can't. It's that might have been where the translation was lost, because what I was trying to say, what I was trying to say was, the soldier who is invading a country or initiating a territory is in the wrong and obviously can be ethically killed, but the defending soldier cannot be ethically killed.
So I want to take a few examples again. If a girl says, I love everything about my boyfriend, if I said, this movie goes on forever, or someone says, man, this guy has all the money in the world, I ask the judges and the people, did you believe that the girl really had zero problems or conflict with her boyfriend ever? Do you believe that the movie actually exists that could go on forever? And when talking about a man that seamlessly has all the money in the world, do you think he holds the entirety of the world's GDP just right in their pockets? Obviously not. It matters what I'm saying. You know what I'm saying. And when it comes to John Brown and proving that, saying that he did nothing wrong, right? This is obviously an expression. You know what I mean? We mean that in the actions that he took, we agree with the morality of his claim to fame, which is the incidents that occurred during Bleeding Kansas, and the raid on Harper's Ferry. We agree with the liberation of slaves from plantations, where he would kill a slave owner and free 11 slaves. These are the actions of which I am showing agreement to. And I have not heard my opponent disagree with any of those actions. What I do hear him disagree with is on 5 people, right? Saying that they did not act first and that they were randomly murdered. This is just a lack of context and understanding of history. We understand that at the time we had a violent interstate civil war going on. We understand that the people that John Brown attacked had threatened his family. We understand that they had engaged in the captivity of Americans, people that are free out on the street right now because people like John Brown fought, were being enslaved by people like the Doyles, who used violence to make sure that the state could have their captives. And then when they went from Tennessee to Kansas, helped the local militias attack, harass, beat, and persecute any people that hold the morality true that slavery is wrong. Not only did they beat and attack them, but they had the goal to openly threaten John Brown. And for this, they paid with their life. He says that the violence started with John Brown. I say the violence started when they decided to persecute innocent men. And I believe that when my opponent Gruffudd debates by the letter of the law, this shows that he has a misunderstanding of communication and doesn't hold the fundamental building blocks of what it takes to understand literacy and comprehension in communication, and therefore has already forfeited this argument.
By breaking moral rules in cross, my opponent left us without any objective standard. If exceptions were permitted whenever someone believes their cause is righteous enough, then morality becomes nothing more than power or passion deciding right and wrong. The very logic one justified keeping human beings in chains. In the end, it all comes down to the basic question of logic and ethics. Can a real ethical rule allow exemptions for certain people or causes? If there is a rule that says it's wrong to start violence against those who haven't harmed or attacked anyone, that rule has applied to everyone, no asterisks, no except when the cause is noble enough. The moment you grant one exception, the rule collapses. Anyone can claim their own cause is noble enough and justify the same act against you or anyone else. Defending the plain statement, John Brown did nothing wrong, requires exactly that kind of exemption. One time passed because his fight was against a monstrous evil. But because we bend the rule for him, we've broken it for good. Slavery was an abomination, and history is full of people who took extraordinary risks to end it. We can honor the courage and outcome without insisting every act along the way was flawless. A consistent ethical standard meant nothing less and nothing more. Yield the rest of my time.